In the latest in a series of sparse updates, or should that be non-updates, surrounding the future of the James Bond film series, Barbara Broccoli was asked by Lad Bible on the red carpet of the BAFTA Film Awards on Sunday the 19th of February about whether or not there had been any movement on the project. She responded, "No, we haven't even started casting yet. There isn't even a script."
Thinking of the future, when do you think there'll be an announcement? Because honestly, we're all exhausted.
Imagine how I feel. It'll be a while. We have a lot of work to do before we start casting.
Okay, that's what I need to know.
But we're on the case.
Good evening, Mr. Bond fans. In almost every sense, this is no news to most of us. However, I think that it is interesting in how it relates to some of the Aaron Taylor-Johnson casting rumours that have been swirling around of late. These reports started popping up and it was much the same as it always is. An unnamed source says this, bookie's favourite that. Absolutely nothing concrete at all. I made a video on the subject not that long ago, but since that video, there was another report from an apparently reliable scoop source for Puck News that Aaron Taylor-Johnson had indeed met with Barbara Broccoli about the James Bond role. Now, I don't think that this really means an awful lot because, well, Eon will meet with lots of different actors when it comes to casting a new Bond, and Barbara's comments of late have always added the general caveat of, well, we're figuring out the general direction we're going first. We need to get writing before we get casting.
And how is the search going?
It's not going just yet.
Why not?
We have a lot of work to do before we start looking for casting the role. I mean, we have to kind of, reboot the whole series. We have to think about what the storyline is going to be and the trajectory.
But with this latest non-news doing the rounds, it did get me wondering, and I know an awful lot of fans wondering. Like, No Time to Die has been and gone. The 60th anniversary has been and gone. It's been a few years now. What's taking so long? One of No Time to Die's original release dates, and the most likely premiere month before the pandemic hit, was April 2020, and by all accounts the film was in the can and completed when it was postponed in March of that year. That was 3 years ago, and yes, we don't want to think about what comes next until Craig has had his final moment in the Bond limelight, and then sure, the 60th anniversary celebrations are here and they're great, and it was fun to celebrate the entirety of the series, but, I mean, it's been 3 years since the last movie was completed, and there are still no concrete ideas about how to move forward with this thing? Why is that? And don't get me wrong, I do think that allowing Craig his final Bond glory lap was a worthwhile excuse for not getting started on the next era. Similarly, the 60th anniversary, okay, that makes sense. It's great to have an entire year celebrating the entirety of this film series rather than focusing on what's going to be coming next, but let's face it, if Eon were truly hungry for this, they would be moving forward quicker. And I'm obviously not suggesting that Eon be chained to their desks to get moving on this thing. I don't want them to feel forced into having to get going with this, but it is the downside of having an hereditary monarchy. At the top of this thing, you are kind of waiting for them to feel like they want to make one of these things, and they're clearly busy with other things, but what exactly are those other things?
So what's so damn important?
Well, I think there's a pretty big clue to be found looking at Barbara Broccoli's filmography of late. Eon Productions produces the James Bond films, and since its formation for 50 plus years, aside from Bond films, it produced a single non-007 movie, 1963's Call Me Bwana, the poster of which you can see in From Russia With Love, of course. And since 2014, there have been a variety of films, mainly dramas, coming out of the company. Film stars Don't Die in Liverpool, Till most recently, The Rhythm Section, which admittedly is more of a low-budget action thriller, but these films are amongst what is coming out of Eon. Barbara Broccoli is credited as a producer on those 3 films, and they have obviously been drawing a lot of her time and energy. It's entirely possible that Broccoli is looking for some other kind of legacy as well as James Bond, or at least that's certainly what I infer from some of her comments in this Deadline article about her perceived snub from the Oscars on Till. They looked away, Broccoli says of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences voters who flat out denied Cheonye Chukwu's movie Till any Oscar nominations. The President of the United States, however, refused to look away, says Broccoli, referring to Joe Biden's decision to host a screening at the White House last week. I was there and it was extraordinary because he understood what Till represents. And you know, it's part of history now because Biden saw it. The keeper of the 007 franchise bit her lip when I asked whether she found it a bit odd that the Oscars simply ignored Till. She shakes her head. There's a conversation to be had, she says. a quiet conversation with me when the season's over, she adds. Now, I've not seen Till as of yet, and I've not seen any of the other Eon-produced non-Bond movies aside from the rhythm section, and apparently I was one of about 12 people on Earth who actually rather liked that film. But I don't think it's unfair of me to say that none of those films that I've mentioned have really broken through into the mainstream as of yet. And maybe emotionally impacting dramas are just what Broccoli is more interested in at the moment. Till could not be more awards baity if it tried. It ticks all of the usual awards boxes. It's a biographical drama dealing with pertinent social themes, focusing on a harrowing real-life event featuring a powerhouse lead performance, and there's nothing wrong with that, obviously, and to be honest, I'd quite like to see the film myself. But thing is, I'd never seen like an advert for the film. I'd never heard about it until I was reading about it through articles relating to Barbara Broccoli and how she feels like it's been snubbed. I don't feel like it made that much of a splash with the public, despite receiving great critical praise. Even No Time to Die had a For Your Consideration awards push after its release, so this is clearly something that the producers are going for, and if statues are what they're after, then is that just taking precedence over Bond at the moment? There's also the fact, of course, that Broccoli's producing partner, Michael G. Wilson, is 81 years old as of this video, and quite reasonably is perhaps not going to be as active as he once was. I've mentioned this before on this channel. At the premiere of No Time to Die, I got the impression that Wilson was flat out retiring. Broccoli came onto the stage with him and made something of what I sensed was a relatively impromptu speech, or Michael G. Wilson certainly didn't look like he knew what was going to happen, and she thanked him for decades of hard work and being a wonderful producing partner as well as a brother, and all of that, and the tone of which certainly seemed, to me at least, to imply that he was going to be retiring. And my impression was obviously conflicted sometime later when there were reports that he said he had no plans to retire and he'd be keeping on at it, which is great if so, but I think it's clear that Barbara is likely to remain the main driving force for the films at this stage, and if she's busy with other projects, I think that is honestly the main reason why we haven't seen any movement on the Bond series as of yet. There is obviously another possibility, however. I mean, maybe there hasn't been much movement on the future of the series because Broccoli and Wilson have no intention of actually seeing through another era of Bond. Maybe they have little interest in figuring out what the future is going to look like, you know, building a new business relationship with Amazon. Maybe they feel like now is the right time to call it quits and sell their stake in the right to make James Bond films. I mean, it's either that or they keep it in the family and start bringing in their kids in much bigger ways. I mean, Wilson's sons both work at Eon Productions and have had roles on Bond films and games in the past, and now would surely be the time to bring them in a bigger way, surely. And if they were to just sell up their rights to Amazon and Amazon owned the whole thing, it's a good clean slate for them to start doing whatever it is that they want to do with the series. And I'd be lying if I said a part of me wasn't at least slightly intrigued by this prospect. It'd certainly mean we'd get a lot more Bond stuff fairly quickly, I'd imagine, and having been starved of new Bond stuff for quite some time, you know, it's quite tantalizing. The main risk of such an outcome would, of course, be that Bond would run the risk of feeling like, you know, mass-manufactured studio content rather than the bespoke movies we're used to getting. I do love how the Bond series is so unique in franchise cinema in that way. Each film feels like it's this handmade wooden toy that has been passed down through generations and has been loved throughout the decades when you compare it to other, you know, big franchises that have a much more sort of plastic, mass-produced feel to them. And while that might have its benefits, it just doesn't have that same kind of specialness to it. Whatever the eventual outcome, we are obviously still a ways off Bond 26. If I were being conservative with my own sort of expectations, I'd say somewhere towards the end of 2025 could be a possible release date. If I were pessimistic, I'd say 2026, and if I were thinking I really need to change the overall theming of this channel, I would say 2027. That is just totally my own fan speculation, by the way. As ever when it comes to these things, my main bit of advice is to always be skeptical of any articles or reports you might see or read, you know, citing unnamed sources and the like, particularly as I feel like we're in for a bit of a slow year with new Bond news. I don't think we're gonna see anything concrete this year. I'll be more than happy to be proven wrong with that, and indeed, I'm very keen to be proven wrong on that, but I think we'll be lucky if we have any sort of, sliver of news by the end of this year. Or am I being too pessimistic? Please do let me know your own thoughts on this in the comment section below, as well as, what you think a realistic timeline for the next Bond film could look like. Also, below you can click the subscribe button and the Mrs. Bell notification button to stay super up to date on future video uploads that I'll be making on this channel. There's a variety of links to my various social media pages below, so please do follow me on those if you care to do so. And with all that being said, and until next time, Bond fans, so long for now.